These mercies we ask in your name. Amen.
Thank you very much. Any apologies for absence? Dr. Maurice Guy has called in to say he's speaking in the sectoral debate today and he may be late if he makes it. No other apologies. All right. I move to item 4. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Auditor General and her team. Welcome, Madam Permanent Secretary from the Ministry and your team. Mr. Watson and his team from PetroJam, Mr. Richardson and his team from PCJ. All the other officials who are here, Mrs. Blake and her team from the Ministry of Finance. And of course, members. We will proceed with the business that we have been on for the last few months today. And before we get to that, we have the matter of the minutes of the last meeting, which was May 28th. Members, we'll just go through that page by page quickly before moving for their adoption. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9. Madam Clerk, on page 9, in the second paragraph, the second sentence says, where it says, he said that in the 5-year period mentioned, there was a spike. It's really in the second half of the 5-year period, which was after, it began from 2016 onwards. Page 9. Second paragraph, second sentence, in the second half of the 5-year period. Yeah. Page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, and page 14. Would somebody care to move for the adoption of the minutes, subject to that correction? Moved by Member Clark, seconded by Member Bunting. Thank you. Minutes are adopted. Matters arising. Well, I think before we get into the matters arising, the Auditor General has asked me for the opportunity to say something to the committee arising from a media report that I think is in one of the newspapers today affecting her office. And I thought that it was fair and just that she be afforded the opportunity to address us on that matter. So, members, if there's no objection, I would ask that we allow her, Madam Auditor General, to make a brief statement on the matter.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. I have a brief statement prepared. And let me begin by expressing my gratitude for allowing me to address the committee on the matter of the accountability process governing the Auditor General's Department. Year after year since 2014, I have listened quietly to the calls for an audit of the Auditor General's Department. I remained silent on the matter with the acknowledgement that the responsibility for tabling the reports associated with such audits is not the responsibility of the AUGD. However, a newspaper article published today suggests, based on a statement attributed to a member of Parliament, that there are matters that the Auditor General's Department should answer to. It is my view that the tone of this article requires my immediate response from myself as Auditor General. Mr. Chairman, the constitutional responsibility of the Auditor General's Department demands that speculation of questionable action or operation must be addressed immediately. The implication is not only local, but international as well. A properly functioning public audit body is essential to both the citizen and investors' confidence in the country. Having said that, Mr. Chairman, let me hasten to say that the requirement for the audit of the Auditor General's Department should be done because it is the right thing to do. Good governance necessitates that. It should not be demanded because of an unfortunate view held that the Auditor General Department criticizes other government entities year after year. That questions the objectivity of the call for such an audit. The work of the AUGD is defined by the Constitution. The Auditor General's Department is the third arm of control as set out in the Constitution, the first being the Parliament and the second being the Minister of Finance. The Auditor General's Department exists to give the Parliament and the people of Jamaica the assurance that things are happening as they should, and where there's departure, issues are appropriately identified and addressed. Under the Constitution, the Minister of Finance has the responsibility to cause an annual audit of the AUGD. The internal auditor of the Ministry of Finance has undertaken this yearly review. That is the responsibility of the internal auditor of the Ministry of Finance. I have over the years questioned the delay in submitting the report to Parliament. I'm advised that 2 years will be tabled today. I want to also disclose that I have had discussions with the Honorable Minister of Finance about this matter, and a few months ago provided him with internal documents, such as the AUGD's internal audit reports, which are provided to the Ministry of Finance on a quarterly basis. The AUGD's internal auditor reports to an independent audit committee comprised of members from the private sector, with one member from the AUGD being on that committee in compliance with the law. The committee does not report to me. The report of the audit committee is sent directly to the Ministry of Finance. It is not even sent to me for information purposes. The internal auditor also provides me with a quarterly report. I provided the Minister of Finance copies of these reports. That includes a tracking report which provides information on the length of time taken by the AUGD to implement the proffered recommendation. I wish to bring to the PAC and the Parliament's attention a report which was submitted by the AUGD to and tabled by the Honourable Speaker of the House in December 2017. The report, Supreme Audit Institution Performance Management Framework Assessment, was the result of an external expert team comprised of 3 consultants from the Netherlands, the UK, and Brazil, procured and funded by the Inter-American Development Bank. The AUGD played no role in selecting the consultants. The report was also quality assessed by the IDB as well as the Interside Development Initiative, an organization based in Oslo, Norway. I will also declare that I requested this review to measure the performance of the organization and identify shortcomings as it pertains to implementation of international standards. That report was submitted to Parliament not because it was a requirement, but because I thought it was the right thing to do. The AUGD strategic business plan was submitted alongside the report. Our strategic business plan outlines the steps that will be taken to address the deficiencies identified. All reports can be accessed on our website and via LinkedIn. We did not have a Twitter account at the time, and hence the report was not shared through that medium. All these steps have been undertaken in the interest of transparency, Mr. Chairman. Because as Auditor General, I value the importance of a proper functioning of the department to the local and international perception of good governance arrangements within the government of Jamaica. I therefore request, Mr. Chairman, that the specific concerns in relation to the AUGD be raised in Parliament in a similar way, in the similar manner it is raised for other public bodies, so that these matters can be appropriately addressed. I would be happy to answer any questions at this moment or any other time deemed appropriate. Thanks for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Auditor General.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Warmington.
On the subject raised by the Auditor General, I have consistently, year after year, request that the Minister of Finance lay audited report on the Office of the Auditor General. I have done it repeatedly, and I must commend this Minister of Finance. He's the first of 4 Ministers of Finance that I requested this from. He's the first to have made an effort. And it is my right as a Member of Parliament to request such audit. There's no agency of government that supersedes Parliament and is too big to be audited. And I demanded that the Minister of Finance audit this department and submit audit report just like other agencies in the Department of Government. And I have no apology to make. Whether an international group did a review of the Auditor General Office is not important to me. Their job or duty cannot supersede the Parliament and the job and duty of the Minister of Finance. The Minister of Finance is obligated to the people of Jamaica and the Parliament to lay such report. And the Auditor General said it should be raised in Parliament. I've raised this consistently in Parliament. Let me finish.
Yeah.
I've raised it consistently in Parliament. So about raising other quarters, I've done it consistently. And I made it clear last the finance meeting that I will not allow this Parliament to approve any more allocation to that department without the minister laid the report here. I made it clear. And secondly, she said that there's 2 years audited financial statement being laid today. It is totally unacceptable, and I'll advise the minister of such. This department, I've been back here now 17 years. I think I'm back here about 17 years I've been back here. I've served in this department 20 years. And I've experienced Adrian Strawn's performance as the Auditor General, which was commendable. I must make it clear. When he lays something here, it was sacrosanct. When he audit a department and bring it here, you question, there's nothing to be questioned. And for the 70 years I've served as I came back to Parliament, I've seen no audit report for that department. I'm not saying the fault is for the Auditor General or department. The Minister of Finance is supposed to be doing it, and it has not been done. I will not today accept any 2-year report. If you give a 2-year report, how can you arrive at the last 2 years or what 2 years? What about the preceding years? You can't pick up an audit in the middle of a period or the end of a period without you audit the beginning of the period. So laying an audit here that is under 10 years, it makes no sense. I won't say much because when it comes to that, I need to see what years those are for. But you can't pick up at the end or in the middle. And I have no apology to make to anybody to question the obligation of the Minister of Finance, whether it has to do with the Auditor General Department or any other department. I have no apology to make, and I consistently raise my concern as to why there's one agency and department of government that is not audited, and this department audits all the other departments and bring report here. I need to see the reported audit from that, audited statement from that department.
We understand your position. I think the point is not that anyone is objecting to your call for the tabling by the minister of the audits that have been done. That is not the issue that has been raised here today. There was comments made in the media suggesting that there were issues within the department that ought to be investigated, or was somehow something was amiss. There was some suggestions to that of that type, and I think that kind of allegation, if indeed it was made, is worthy of a response from the Auditor General, which she has made. And she said, what are they? Please put them on the table so she can address them, because she would like to address them. Or is it concerned the fact that the audited reports that have been produced have not been tabled?
What media you're talking about? I don't know what you're talking about, because I'm seeing a report you're making reference to, so I can't respond to that. I don't know what you're talking about.
I believe it concerns remarks attributed to you, so you
I
may
don't know
want
what
to
you're
inform
talking
yourself.
about. I haven't seen any
you
remarks.
may wish to inform yourself, and I think it's in the Observer newspaper.
That's why I'm saying I can't respond to it, because I haven't seen remarks attributed to me where that's concerned. So I don't know what remark it is, where it came from. I don't know what you're talking about. So I haven't seen it, so I can't respond to that yet.
Well, I hope you will when you see it.
I said I cannot respond to it yet. So you mean I hope you will? What did I say? I said I cannot respond to it yet.
Good.
Right, so you say you hope I will.
I hope you will when you see it.
I said I cannot respond yet. So what more do you expect from that?
Very well, Member Warmington, on fine form. But the issue is, as has been stated by the Auditor General, the internal audit is done through the ministry and is sent there. It is for the ministers to table it in Parliament. You've been calling for it, and apparently 2 years are going to be tabled today. You've congratulated the minister for that, and you've indicated that you're not happy with the fact that it's 2 years. The issue raised by the Auditor General is not to do with that. It is to do with other remarks attributed to you. So I'm glad you said yet several times. All right. We will move to the matters at hand. Members, in relation to matters arising, we have received today, and again, you know, life would be a lot easier if we could get these things in advance of the meeting, but we have received today, tabled here, and I hope members have it. There is a letter from the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology to the Public Accounts Committee dated June 7th. And SPS.
Are you hearing me? Yeah. Each time we appear here, the comment is made that the documents were only received this morning. The fact of the matter is that we respond when we get the letters. And the letters are sent on a Thursday, sometimes on I have to get the information from Petroleum. We have to put it together, we have to make the copies and send them in. So it is unfortunate that we are unable to provide it before the morning of the meeting, but it is not the negligence of the ministry why the information is only provided. And I think I needed to say that today because it has been said at each occasion, and the response is a function of when the information comes. Because fine, I have my officer who attends with me take notes at the meeting, but it's one thing for you to have one view, and then when you get the letter, it may be quite a different request that is being made. And so while we go and we prompt and encourage the agencies to prepare, we do await the letter being sent.
Yes, thank you, Pierce, and we appreciate the timely manner in which you handle these matters, and appreciate also that getting the responses to us on a timely basis is not entirely within your hands. In fact, you're not the one providing the responses, so you know you forward them to the clerk when you get them. It's just that from a member's perspective, getting substantive material on the morning of the meeting is not desirable because there's no time to review it. And of course, as I said, I'm not attributing any blame to the ministry in that regard. So members, we have this document. It's a cover letter from the ministry enclosing a response from the two letters, both dated May 29th. One is from the chairman of the Integrity Commission. Well, sorry, both of them are from the ministry to the Integrity Commission and to MOCA, requesting an urgent update on the matters that they have been investigating. Isn't there a response somewhere in there? To that? Where is that? Something sure. I saw a response. I believe there was a response from the chairman of the Integrity Commission.
There is a response from the Director of Investigations, I think the title is.
Yes.
There has been no response from MOCA.
Yes. And the response of the Director of Investigations, which I have seen, I think it was in an email you sent this morning, was to cite the provision in the Integrity Commission Act that prevents them from disclosing anything prior to their report being tabled in Parliament. Anyway, I hope that they will regard your letter as essentially asking them to hurry up and complete their investigation and table whatever it is they have to table in Parliament, because the point underlying the request made to UPS last time is that this is an urgent matter, and a protracted investigation, I think, is not serving the public interest. The public needs to know whatever findings there are. The Auditor General was able to complete her report and table it from 2018 to December. We are now in June 2019, and we have not had a report from the Integrity Commission. So they need to expedite whatever it is they're doing so that the public interest in having this matter brought to a head, or at least to a conclusion as regards that stage of it, which is the Integrity Commission's investigation, can occur. So we also have a letter from Petrojam to the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry responding to some of the issues that had come out in the last meeting. Members, do you have this? This is dated June the 6th from on Petrojam's letterhead.
Get you clear. You said there was no response from...
MOCA apparently have not responded to the letter of May the 29th, so far anyway.
An Integrity Commission?
The Integrity Commission has responded to indicate that they can't give a response because the Integrity Commission Act doesn't allow them to speak to a matter that's being investigated until they table their report in Parliament. Hence my remarks that I hope they will hurry up and finish their investigation and table the report. What we really want is the report. So that is what we have so far. But there's also this, some information and data that have been provided by, that has been provided by Petrojam. And there's a letter of June the 6th. So I'm just asking if members have that letter. Yeah. All right. And in it, they cover a number of issues. So the first issue we've already spoken to, which is the ongoing investigations being conducted by the Integrity Commission and MOCA. And we've already spoken to that and the response that we've received from one agency, which is to essentially say they can't give a response, and the other one hasn't responded at all. Secondly, the second issue they address, it relates to the oil losses, both accounted and unaccounted for oil losses. And I'm going to just read what is said in the cover letter about that. It says, in the AGD report on Petrojam, reference was made to unaccountable oil loss. Oil loss is defined as accounted and unaccounted losses. Accounted losses are losses which are identified and quantified. Unaccountable losses are those losses which are not identified or quantified and is measured as a difference between total loss and accounted for loss. This generally includes the losses that result from incorrect calculation procedures, water and sludge determination, leaks, emissions, and losses not yet identified, and underestimation of known losses. Table 1 attached gives a breakdown of the total losses by area, which includes accounted for losses as well as unaccounted for the period 2013 to 2018. Note, well, the unaccounted losses are imputed to processing or crude losses. Table 2 shows the losses by products from the sales and distribution terminals and is part of the accounted for losses. See Appendix 1 for full details. So there's an Appendix 1 with a Table 1 and a Table 2 on this topic. there's also right, so that relates to the oil losses. Then the third issue that the Petrojam's letter addresses concerns the breakdown of expenditure on the 35th anniversary celebration, the cost per head for the 4 different activities. As you recall last time, the cost per head didn't include many of the cost items, and therefore the figure was significantly understated. So that has been represented for us as Appendix 2. And then the fourth point raised relates to the terms of reference for the pricing committee of Petrojam. And some suggestions were made at our last meeting in relation to the terms of reference, and the response is that those have been duly noted and they will make appropriate adjustments. So members, we have this material before us, and perhaps we could just go through it. It doesn't seem to be too extensive to go through now. So looking at the oil loss situation in Appendix 1, I think it's worth reading the cover note to Appendix 1, oil loss overview. In the Auditor General report on Petrojam, reference is made to reported unaccountable oil loss, estimated at 600,684, I think, BBLS, which is that barrels? Yeah. Valuing $5.2 billion in 5 years. Petrojam, in response, dated September 19, 2018, provided information to the Auditor General's Department indicating that total losses, which includes losses that are accounted for and those unaccounted for, was 589,129 barrels. So that's a difference of about, 11,500 barrels. In Petrojam's response to the AGD report submitted to the Public Accounts Committee, the detailed breakout of the losses by area was provided. It says reference table 1, page 6, which showed total accounted for losses of 374,214 barrels. So that's 374,214 barrels accounted for losses, and unaccounted for losses of 214,915 barrels. A copy of this table is provided here. So we have that table. That's table 1. It was indicated in Petrojam's response to the AGD report that accounted for losses are known losses which are identified and quantified. The accounted for losses are typically those relating to custody transfers, losses around the sales terminal, and identified losses in the processing operations. The accounted for losses are categorized as terminal losses, which are losses at the marketing terminals and the marine sales, and processing or non-terminal losses. Only the terminal losses can be identified by product type, as daily volume balances can be and are conducted and reported per finished product. And Table 2 provides a breakdown by product, by finished product. The processing losses arise from the various stages and steps in the conversion of crude oil to finished products, and hence is not product specific until the finished products are routed to tankage. Unaccounted for losses are the identified losses when the accounted for losses are subtracted from the total loss. Are the unidentified losses when the accounted for losses are subtracted from the total loss. This generally includes the losses that result from incorrect calculation procedures, water sludge determination, leaks, emissions, losses not yet identified, and underestimation of known losses. Over the past 5 years of Petrojam's unaccounted for losses, the total has been 214,915, 214,915 barrels, representing 36% of the total oil loss. So of the total oil losses, 36% are unaccounted for losses. In addition, unaccounted losses can neither be identified by area nor product, but are assigned as processing loss by convention. Any attempt to break down the losses apart from the terminal losses is at best a guesstimate. So just to try and get a better understanding of what you're saying there, Mr. Watson, what you're saying is that for the unaccounted for losses, it is only those that occur at the terminal that you can attribute to a particular product or other.
By product, that's correct.
Other than that, you really don't know what products are unaccounted for.
No,
and you attribute it by convention to the processing loss.
That's correct, Chair.
And I think in the letter you said were imputed to processing or crude losses. Yeah.
That's
so that
correct.
they're imputed to crude, whether they're crude or not. That's how it's attributed.
That's because your starting point is from the crude going
Yeah.
through the system.
It's coming through the system. All right. Members, there's table 1 with a breakdown of losses by area over the 2013 to 2018 period. So they have, in that table, there's a row, the first row below the dates, the year by year dates. The first row, A, is the refinery statistics losses, and that's where the 589,129 come from. I don't know why that figure would be slightly different to what the AGD's report had stated. I'm not sure what the accounts for the difference. It's not a huge difference, but it is a difference. And then there's a breakdown from KI. What does KILR stand for?
That's the Kingston Industrial Loading Rack.
Kingston Industrial Loading Rack. and MILR is Montego Bay
Montego.
Industrial Loading?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So the different categories, and there are 16 different categories here, members, of sources of loss. So there's the KILR transfer, KILR sales, MILR transfer, and MILR sales. There's the LPG terminal. That's the NPW terminal. Just remind me what NPW is for.
Newport West.
Newport West terminal. Asphalt terminal. PSV releases.
That's a pressure valve.
Pressure.
It's a pressure safety valve.
A valve. Pressure safety valve releases. Fugitive leaks around the pump seals. BS and W removed. What's the BS and W?
That's sediments, water.
Okay. Sludge and that, so. Evaporative losses, tankage. S and W bias. What's S and W bias?
Same sediments and water. S and W.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at table 1 here. Yeah. Oh, there's another. Okay, yeah, thank you. This is just a replication of the same thing, but with that description. All right. Marine sales, line press, leaks and spills, other process unit losses. And so they have a total accounted for losses. And then
Just for,
right.
for
I see what this doesn't have is the aggregate column in the right, whereas the one in this table has a total column. This one has a total for each one in the right hand column, but the other one doesn't have that.
But just for clarification,
Yeah.
in transit losses, Mr. Watson, is that all the various transportation losses, or does it refer to a particular transit?
That's correct. All
Okay.
the movements. it's a work in progress that we are always looking at how we
So
can
so
be
when you
more
have a
accurate
negative
with our
number,
measurements.
like for LPG terminal, a negative number there, 25,757 minus, what does that indicate? It is in the table 1? Yeah.
It actually indicates a gain. So sometimes when you when you take the measurements, so the product comes in and you take a measurement, you transfer it, whether because of temperature or what have you, or whether the ship was not steady when you were dipping the ship. When it comes on shore and you take another measurement, if the two numbers are different, it can either be, usually it's a loss, but you can get a gain because of measurement errors. So the negative number denotes a gain. That means you get more than you bought.
And the LPG seems to be particularly prone to that because you have that occurring in 4 of the years. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then on the loss by product, which is only for the terminaling over the same period, it's set out here between losses at the loading rack and line press and marine sale loss, and then overall terminaling loss for a range of products from 87R to 90R right through to asphalt. And again, we have some negative losses here. We have negative losses for 4 of the products: heavy fuel oil, something called other, propane, and butane. All of those are gains, apparently. Yeah. So if one wanted to calculate the value of the unaccounted for, so Mr. Sorry, this table 2, just remind me, where we have the byproduct, these are unaccounted for losses at the terminal.
No, these are accounted for.
These are accounted for losses.
But it's broken down by product. The first sheet showed you by area,
Mm-hmm.
and the next sheet is by product itself.
So it's giving us really the same information, but just presented in a different format, Mr. Watson.
Sorry, I didn't.
So the table 2 is really giving us the same information as table 1, but just presented in a different
by
format.
volume and by product.
By product,
yes.
rather than by area.
By area, that's correct.
Okay. So the only where you find the unaccounted losses in these tables is just in the balancing item in table 1 between the total for accounted and then the total input net. And there's a difference. Is that right? Not really sure how that. If you look in table 1, where you have total accounted in red ink, and then you go across to the total column, we have 374,214, and then you have IC unaccounted, which is A minus B, which is the 589 at the top. Okay, versus that total to give you that. And we have total input net. That is what
that would have been, remember,
the entire
over the period,
the entire product.
The total throughput of crude products through the refinery.
To get your percentage.
80 million barrels over the period.
Okay. So, members, do you have any questions on this? Mr. Dunn?
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. Just for my sake, could you just indicate what is line press? That's number 1. And number 2 is the last PAC sitting We were told by, I don't remember his name, is sat beside, he's not here today, that there was a percentage of oil that was literally underground, that was recoverable. Was that taken in consideration any at all in this breakdown of oil losses?
Mr. Hewitt, well, usually if you have tanks leaking, which sometimes happen, or even the pipelines, then that goes in the ground, and we have a couple of pumps around the refinery that we recover that. Whatever we recover, we put that back in as part of our recovery. Now, in the case of the, well, let me start at the beginning.
But my recollection is that he mentioned that it was recoverable, but I'm not sure if it was ever recovered.
Yeah, man, we recover it. Not all of it, but on an ongoing basis, we recover oil from the ground that leaks on the ground. That's an ongoing part of our process.
Member Dunn, you see the description of what line presses on this sheet?
Now, line presses, just each line would be empty. So before, if you're transferring from, say, the refinery to the loading rack, then you'll be filling up the line when you're pumping across. So at some point, that line will be charged, and you'd have products inside there. Remember, when you start with an empty line, and then you pump, so you fill the line. When the tank, for instance, is filled up, you'd still have product in the line. So you have to account for that as well.
Remember one thing?
Mr. Watson, how
the
about...
line is never totally empty then. Sorry.
I have a couple of questions, but just before I start, could you remind me, I think you had given it at an earlier meeting, there is a sort of industry standard or benchmark for these types of losses in aggregate. It was 0.4%.
It's between 0.3 and 0.9 there for the industry.
Okay, so
we use 0.4 for our
as your benchmark.
Our benchmark. That's correct.
Okay, and in a sense, is that a sort of target that you want to achieve for
That's correct.
And I imagine that range would reflect the different size refineries, the different technology used, etc. Why you'd have that kind of range.
Depending on the technology, depending
exactly.
on the complexity, depending on the size.
But one of the things I remember, in some university course I had done, they said when something started to be measured and observed, the very act of measuring it and observing it tended to improve the performance. And I'm looking at the prompt for issue 6, which is the oil losses. And it says that year to date, your oil loss was 0.2%. I'm looking at okay, I don't even see the data
so
on this.
I think you're touching base on some of the initiatives that,
right.
that
so
have taken
just,
place.
I think this prompt is the one I pulled out was like March, but can you tell me what the year to date is up to present for this year?
Right now it's about 0.2. About 0.2.
About 0.2.
What happened, just to touch on the point you raised, so one of the things we have been doing is what they call daily measurements of oil movements. So all these different categories that you see in table 1, where the oil is transferring from the rack to the refinery to the terminal to the ship to JPS, ship to Montego Bay, we're now accounting for all of those movements on a daily basis. So by the next day, if there's a number out,
then it gets
we can
the attention of management. So if we were averaging, and I'm not, it has ranged over the last 5 years, loss volume percent has fluctuated from as low as 0.3% to as high as 1.17%. And that has resulted in the AG's calculation of the the loss value being about 18 billion. The average for that period was 0.74%. So if we are now, based on the increased attention and management of this issue, able to maintain the 0.2% that you have this year, we would reduce that 18 billion over the next 5 years by maybe 70%. We would get back about 12, 13, 14 billion that we would otherwise have lost if we're operating on the same basis as the previous 5 years.
Right, depending on the price. Depending on the price of the...
Depending on the price, but just using that, the average prices, are the same. But in any event, you would be losing a lot less at whatever price. You'd be losing a lot less than you had been operating for the previous 5 years. So I think this, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to point out, the exercise that we go through reviewing these Auditor General reports. The value of the Auditor General's report is more than just theoretical. This is an exercise that has helped management.
Remember, I have to tell you, we're not doing it because of the Auditor General.
Whatever you may say that.
We're doing it because that is our standard operating practice.
Boy, it's just coincidence, Mr. Watson. Just absolute coincidence that your standard operating practices have made a great leap forward in the 6 months since the Auditor General tabled her report. It may be coincidence, but my own view is that the increased attention at this, on this loss figure, perhaps has been triggered by, the Auditor General pointing out the scale of these losses over 5 years. And I'm not saying this as any criticism. I'm just saying there's value for all of us who come here and give every Tuesday morning to go through it, and for the team at the Auditor General's department who probably spend months putting these things together. I don't believe it is just an administrative exercise. I believe we can get real value out of these if we take them seriously and respond in a sincere way, using the report almost like a consultant's report to help us to be more efficient and see things that the fresh eyes might identify and the people who are operating day to day may stop seeing inadvertently.
Well, as I said, remember, there were several initiatives underway. So perhaps, as you say, it's coincidental, but there were a number of things that were...
No, it's you said it's coincidental, not me. I believe it is a little more than coincidental.
But yeah, there were several things taking place. And so maybe the focus, it may appear that it's over the last 6 months, but over the years, we have taken several tanks out of service that were leaking. We have done repairs. We have repaired pressure valves that would blow off at different times. We have looked at line presses, ensuring that we don't have any leaks. So it's several things. I mean, it beef up our security. As I said, the big point of all of that, though, is your daily checks. Once you're checking it every day, every single movement.
And when did you start doing the daily checks?
When? We started last... Around, Mr. Morris tell me around 2013 we started it. When I was there, we started it, I remember, and then what you do is over the years you constantly try to improve on it, right?
Mr. Watson, but with those daily checks for the previous 5 years, your losses were more than 3 times what it is this year. So it's a little more than the daily checks and the routine things that you're doing. But I'm just giving you...
I'll admit that it may look coincidental, but I'll assure you that there are several initiatives that have been taking place and continue to so do.
But at least, Mr. Chairman, we can comfort ourselves that this year the oil losses are well within the industry standards and within the margin that Petrojam has set for itself. So while it may be useful from a forensic audit point of view to go back and see what happened, but at least we seem to have stopped the hemorrhage for the time being. So.
Yes, I'm afraid.
To you, Chair. I know that you had mentioned, I asked about the incorrect calculation procedure. You said it was a work in progress. Can you explain that?
Calculations?
No, as far as this generally includes the losses that result from incorrect calculation procedures. Can you explain?
Well, I can let Mr. Morgan, but just as a for example. So like when you're flaring, I don't know if you ever drive past the refinery, see the flare. That is it's a calculated number. So what you're doing is you're taking the gas and you're calculating it to a liquid, and sometimes you can get errors in that, but he can give you more details on that.
Yeah, morning Chairman, morning members. So just using the same example as Mr. Watson, one of the aspects actually how you go about oil loss calculation really is loss is equal to your opening inventory, all your inputs, minus your closing inventory, minus sales, minus fuels. So let's take one of the variables, fuels, which encapsulates fuel you use in the refinery, as well as the flared gas you see. By convention, what you have to do is to convert that gas into a liquid equivalent. To do that, you have to take a sample of the gas, analyze its components, what is in it, methane, ethane, etc. Then get a calculated heating value, and then using that heating value to convert to a liquid equivalent. The issue you'll see is that you will sample the gas today and you will get a certain composition, and tomorrow you sample it, it has a different, which value do you use? And that's one of the areas we continue to look at in terms of our numbers and calculations as to what to do. So that's one of the examples.
Member Donoghue.
On the matter of flaring, you mentioned just a calculated value, so there's no meter that measures what is lost there.
So there is a meter. During, I think, about 2016 to about late 2018, our meter was out, and we had to be estimating that value as well. So that's one of the areas that could. The meter is back in service now, so we do have a value. But remember, just to highlight, what you're actually, once you have meter, that's one aspect of the conversion. The other one is actually the composition and the relevant heating value. And if the composition is changing, which we have seen, and the data will show that, that conversion value will be changing, and it comes down to what is the ideal value that you use. That's an area that we continue to focus on and look at to see how best we can even improve, even from where we are right now.
Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Morgan, can you assure us, because I noticed that you didn't mention loss by way of theft. What has come out in the public space is that there was a pipeline running from the plant or your tank containing finished product running to an adjoining property. Can you assure us that that is no longer that you...
Remember, I don't recall that coming out in the public forum. But I will tell you, you will recall that what we have said as Petrojam is that we do random dives within the loading rack, which is from the offshore dock to the shoreline. We do that within our own security department. Last year, the Prime Minister, at the time when he was Minister of Energy, had actually asked earlier this year, had asked the JDF to come in and do a dive as well, to which the JDF said they did not find any connections or any pipelines. On a routine basis, though, we have a very strong security presence that tracks all of these types of movements. They look at people moving, products being transferred, products leaving the refinery, going to Montego Bay. And they're there with the excise, they're there with customs, and they track all the volume that's moving in and out and around the refinery. So we're not aware of any pipeline, at least not in my time.
So Watson, could I just ask you, in relation to the finished products and in table 2, so for example, where we say over the period from 2013 to 18, there was 38,879 barrels of 87 fuel lost, and that's an accounted for loss.
Right.
For example, if there was theft, would that be part of that number? Is it, in other words, all it shows is that you're able to show that you've lost that, and you know how much you've lost, as opposed to a balancing item, which is everything we know we've lost, our opening inventory. The difference is unaccounted for.
I suppose if you, so you're transferring, let's say, 87 from the refinery to the terminal, or you might be loading it on a ship to take it to Montego Bay. I suppose if you calculate it as going to the loading rack to go on a truck, and you're seeing losses there, then there are several factors, and it is possible, but very, very difficult. I can't say a truck. The process of a truck coming into the refinery, loading and going out would require several layers of I am not aware of it.
In your
But
estimation, estimation, Petrojam doesn't suffer any losses due to theft of fuel, finished or
I am
otherwise?
not aware of any, but I presume it is possible, but I am not aware. Because, as I said, a lot of the mistake that people make is they will see a truck in Greenwich Farm, for instance, and they assume that leaving Petrojam going to Greenwich Farm, it must be Petrojam's product. But that's not necessarily true. Once the truck passed the gate of the refinery, the custody transfers to the marketing company. And then there's another set of controls around how you treat the truck once it passed the gate. So when it's loaded, we have our security, we have our metering system, and we measure, and then we seal it with a particular seal. And the marketing companies will also have their sealers and their guys who do the dipstick and check the truck. When the truck passes the gate of the refinery, the custody transfers to the marketing company. Now, you can have different ways and means, which I will not say, that a truck can stop and discharge a drum, or even enough in their line. If you know how the same line press, that line on the truck can hold a couple of gallons, well, 10 gallons, let's say. You have 200 trucks passing through the refinery on a daily basis. So you could easily take 10 gallons out of a truck and you wouldn't see it. But people think that you're stealing from Petrojam.
Who suffers that loss? In that hypothetical,
that would be the marketing company.
They would have paid Petrojam for that line amount?
That is correct. That is correct.
Just going through this account, this table.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll just.
You want to clarify something?
You wanted to clarify
I
something on
think
that?
Mr. Jarrett said
Okay.
he wants.
Yes.
All right. Go
Because
ahead.
he's familiar with a lot of the activities.
Morning, members. Just prior to Mr. Watson's employment, there was in fact a pipeline was attached to our subsea lines, which we intercepted. And there have been attempts, but the security system, I believe, is tight enough to avoid that. There's a 24-hour marine patrol. There are barriers, and I don't want to comment on the adequacy or inadequacy of those, which have been subjected to external audit by the International Port and Security Authorities and have been found to be adequate. Let me not say they are adequate. This system requires, examining our what you call vulnerable areas from pipelines which traverse public space to those near to the fence line. I will not expound on the details of monitoring these particular areas that have gone on over the last 20 years. There have also been attempts to beat the system. The system that we have modernized is like an ATM machine. For you to get fuel at the rock, it's like you putting in essentially your PIN number and loading your truck, which now has a microchip which is identified. For any theft to occur, it would take an elaborate collusion at many layers. Staff, security, staff, security, and the external marketers, representative, etc. What is done inside a Petrodam at times is rotation of personnel, and there are elaborate procedures which again cannot go into the public space, which ensures that this is thoroughly monitored at all times. The ATM system, as I call it in quotations, is audited by the manufacturer's representative, and any weaknesses that may or may be seen are addressed by way of IT interception and also by way of upgrades. The system is not a static one, and it is upgraded periodically as
Mr.
required
Chair,
by the manufacturer.
I don't think it's wise for us to discuss some of the security measures.
I don't think we should get into the details of that, no.
So I think we should just...
Yeah, but
we, as I've offered the last time, we have no difficulty if the members want to come and do a tour, and we'll take you through the full system. Everything.
Appreciate that invitation. Member Phillips. Member Phillips.
Yeah. No, I was just trying to get some clarity on this table. Especially to do with the KILR transfers, loss on sales. In some of the numbers, especially in the 2015-16, you're seeing and 2016-17 some variances. So like in the KILR sales, going from 5611 24-15 to 19 and jumping back, what would have contributed to that fall and then a dramatic rise again?
I will ask Mr. Morgan to address some of those.
This is at the loading rack in Kingston,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So member, in addressing your question, the same could go with other transfers as well. So some of the issues that we have faced, and it's about continuous improvement. One, about calibration of our tanks, right? And that's a program which we have been working through. Our measurement systems around those transfers. There are other issues around, and if you're very steeped into measurement, you're transferring from a large tank to a small tank. When you look at the errors around measurement, and remember you're now doing this manually, it lends itself to greater errors.
Yeah, but in this instance,
yes.
For the loss of sales from the Kingston loading rack, all right, you're going from 5,611 down to 19 the following year, 2015, 2016, back up to 2,995, and then back up to 4,591. I mean, that in itself,
Yes.
I mean, no matter calibration or evaporation or what, that is a dramatic fall, and you're coming right back up.
Sure.
So trying to figure out what would cause that.
Yes, so again, member, as to what exactly would cause that, what I'm able to do is list some of the potential issues that could have caused that. What we look at, though, is what is the tolerance of that. So remember, when you look at all of these losses around the rocks, the 66,000 barrels, this represents less than 0.1, actually 0.008% of losses. So again, that is still within tolerance of your losses as well. So again, it's about continuous improvement, and we continue to work to improve our calibration measurements and again our sampling procedures.
Yes,
Still left confused, but
Chairman, thank you.
You're within the
Where I want to go with you, is Mr. Morgan, is in relation to the when you buy a cargo. Let's say you buy a cargo out of Mexico, 350,000 barrels or whatever it is you take there. What do you pay for? Do you pay for the actual 350,000 barrels delivered, or when the vessel arrives here, the surveyor goes on board and he tells you that it's 320,000 barrels on board? Is that what you pay for, or you pay for what is put on the vessel in Mexico?
Okay. So remember, there are contractual arrangements, and you sound pretty steeped in how the process and the procedure is done. Based on the contract is what is received in your tank. So the measurement starts at load port. So the tank at load port, there's a measurement on the ship at load port. There's a reconciliation there. When the ship arrives at your port or the disport, there's a reconciliation with the ship at load port and disport. When it's discharged into your tank, there's a reconciliation between the ship at disport and your tank. You pay for what is received in your tank around the contractual arrangements.
I should point out, and tell what I can mention, there's a tolerance. Huh?
Yes.
So if you are supposed to get, let's say, 350,000, then there's a plus or minus tolerance. Yes, so if you get less than, I think it's 0.3?
0.5 for crude, 0.3 for
If you
products.
get less than that tolerance, you actually claim back from the supplier. So it all depends on how your contract is worded, but all of those factors are taken into consideration. And the inspector at the disport is an independent person that we both contract. So you have a company that's all they do. All over the world, they go to different ports and they inspect products going on ship, product coming off ship. And
so just a clarification, because the two things, what you just said, I'm trying to reconcile with what Mr. Morgan said before. So let us say you have a contract to buy 350 barrels of product, and you're actually going to pay for what's received in your tank.
Right.
Yeah, and this tolerance of plus or minus X% is applied to what you actually get in your tank?
Depending on the contract, and how the contract is written.
I see.
Right. Correct.
Yeah, Mr. Dunn, sorry, and then
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
What you outlined a while ago, my question is, does the same thing apply to the LPG?
Correct. So, with that particular practice...
Ask again.
Yes.
With what you have outlined, does the same thing apply to LPG?
So the LPG measurement constitutes the same methodology. Ship comes in, measure the ship, and with that, the contract for the LPG situation is actually the volume at the ship itself. So in terms of the contract, it speaks to the volume that is taken off the ship. And that's what the cargo surveyors marshal for every movement. We have checked, member, and other entities on the island is the same practice, and internationally it's the same practice.
Member Phillips, you wanted to say something?
So Morgan was saying that the tolerance is 0.5, which would be your bottom figure on this chart. Yeah? For the complete loss, excluding flare.
No. We're talking about something else.
No, I'm talking about oil losses.
Oh, the oil loss. That's 0.4.
The 1.17 is not a tolerance.
Overall.
That's
right.
not a
So
tolerance.
I'm going back. Try to see if I can find this table for me, because I want to go back to specific.
I think what that percentage at the very bottom is the losses as a percentage of the total inventory.
Yeah, I understand.
It's not the tolerance thing.
Yeah. Because, right, so in that 2015-16, you're 0.31. But then it goes up the following 2016-17 to 0.73, and then 2017-18, 1.17. So I'm looking at the specific, the KILR sales and the various. And I'm trying to, that's why I ask you to look at it specifically, because if in 2015-16 the KILR sales fell to 19, but then jumped back up. You see where I'm talking? All right? And it would go the same for marine sales. You were 1966 in 14-15, 746 in 15-16, but went to negative 6251 in 16-17. You know, so when you have those variances, Chair, all right, I just try.
Bear in mind that the negative number is actually is not a loss, it's a gain.
Exactly, yeah,
It's very
exactly.
volatile.
So, you know, when you see those swings like that, so I'm trying to just figure out what would attribute to the 19 in 15-16, back up to 2995 the following year, and the year after that at 54591. Because those are, the swings are great. That is for the KILR sales, Chairman. Loss on sales from the Kingston loading rack.
Yes, so again, member, I hope I'm clearer this time. I think first we have to start off and is that you're within the tolerance. So if you look at these numbers, you'll be well within the 0.3% around the terminals, which is what the oil loss target is for the terminals themselves and transfers. So you're well within already. So anything that's happening here is very likely around measurements. This could mean just inches, 8/16 out. Remember, you're moving millions of barrels. And a 1/4 inch out or 1/8 inch out could well readily fall within
Mr. Morgan,
these
just
range.
you say that you're well within the 0.3.
Yes.
But
For the terminals. For the terminals.
For the terminals.
Correct.
Okay.
So to bring clarity, Chairman, around the terminals we look at 0.3. Overall, the refinery, crude product, everything, we have set somewhat of a stretch target of 0.4, albeit the industry standard being from 0.35 to about 0.9.
And in the terminal calculation, when you say you're way below the 0.3, what is the denominator?
So you're looking at your overall throughput of that particular product for the year. So there's a daily report that's done at the terminals.
This figure for KILR sales is not product specific.
Yeah, this is.
So this is in barrels here. But if you look, what I'm saying, Chairman, if you look at the last number here relative to the quantum of 87 gasoline sold, it will be way less than 0.3%. And we can provide those numbers as well.
Why are you focusing on 87 gasoline sold as opposed to all products?
To all the products.
To all products. I'm just raising that because Member Phillips did highlight KLR, and I think he mentioned 87 earlier in a previous question.
Yeah. Yes.
Member Clark is...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I notice I'm looking at the oil losses at Petrojam, that table that is presented before us, and I am at item 6, NPW terminal, and I am asking, is there a reason why we have a blank space for 2017, 2018? Yeah. And what's the explanation for that?
You want me to take that? So, member, we operated that terminal up to 2016-17, and we have divested those assets, so we are no longer operating at Newport West.
Who acquired those assets? Who acquired those assets? The Newport West terminal assets?
I think it was sold to Kingston Wharves as part of their expansion.
So we move to item number 9, Mr. Chairman. Year 2013, 2014, we have 14, 15. We have 3 blank spaces for the ensuing years. And then we jumped over to 2017, 2018, and we have a surge of more than 50%, more than 100%, up to 11,344. And this is saying estimated leaks from pumps. Is there an explanation? Is there an explanation for that, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, there's no estimated leak losses for fugitive leaks for those 3
all
years.
Those years, and then.
So, I mean, this is an era. Yeah, member, so this is an era of estimates. I can only respond by saying for these years we're just being very conservative at that. But that's an era that would have to look back and tighten up as well.
Mr. Chairman. Conservative mean how is it conservative
leaks,
to not
that's
have
an
any
estimated number.
But why would it? How is it conservative to estimate 0 as a loss? How is that conservative?
So, on the basis that you're putting yourself in a worst case, rather than assuming that you want to create a scenario whereby you put yourself on the back foot, so to speak, in terms of putting yourself in a worse condition by having that number where it's at. Now, it's an area certainly coming out in 2017 that we look back on, as we have done all the others, to say, well, listen, look, this is something we need to seriously look at, and by checks done, by delving more into the estimates, that's how we came up with the 2017-18 figure. So that's an area we realize needed greater focus.
Yeah, I mean, that number for 2018, 17-18 is one of the bigger line items.
Correct.
You know, if you look at the 11,344 barrels of loss for fugitive leaks is significantly higher than most. There are only, actually, I think, only a couple which are higher than that. So what happened in the prior 3 years? How come you have nothing?
So specifically, Chairman, around 2017-18, we had some specific issues with, I think, 1 or 2 of our crude tanks, whereby the seal around the crude tank was damaged by some processing operations, and by virtue of that, our estimates there, and by the nature of the activities, that was our best estimate in that year. So again, the rule of thumb methodology couldn't be applied as the seal was breached, and we had to use our best estimate in that particular scenario.
Mr. Chairman, I am really even made worse, uncomfortable by the explanation given, because I still want to know why is it that if you're estimating all along, why is it that we don't have a figure, an estimated figure for 2014-15, 2015-16, and 2016-17, seeing that it is just an estimate that is taken and is not an actual measurement. I am really confused in that.
Mr. Morgan, and you describe that as being conservative, which I must say before those me.
Yes. So Chairman, member, again, we look at these areas and we seek to make best estimates. Yeah, best estimates. For those years, we weren't of the view, at least at the time, that was materially significant. I think the start of 2018 into 2017 into 18, we had issues particularly with 2 of our crude tanks, and we have data to show that, what had occurred, and the fixes that were applied subsequent to that. So we never felt throughout those years it was material to have reporting, but certainly in 2017 into 18 we had issues around leaking crude tanks actually through the seal mechanism.
Mr. Chairman, the explanation that is given by Mr. Morgan is still not coming across to me. Reason being, as conservative as anyone wants to be, you must now tell me if 2014-2015 is 10% less than what was taking place in 2013-2014. Whether it is a up or a down, so that we can form. But when you leave 3 blank spaces, you're creating a blank space in my mind and then giving me a space to put in information in it, to think other.
And especially when you say that you didn't think it was material, Mr. Morgan, but the 2013-14 figure for fugitive leaks was actually higher than the loss figure for the KILR sales. So it's not, I mean, there's another line item which had a lower figure than fugitive leaks, and yet you saw it necessary to have data for the losses in that line item going up through all 4 years after that. Whereas for fugitive leaks, which had a higher figure in the 2013-14 year, which is the first year in this table, you didn't see it necessary to do any estimate of losses for that. But I think we can move on to Mr. Member Dunn. I think the point has been made. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Morgan, I'd asked earlier with regards to your explanation of how the processes took place in terms of identifying what we receive versus what we pay for, etc., etc. My question is this. Is there an LPG meter?
Currently, no.
Currently?
There's not a meter.
No. And that meter has not been working for what? Well, not for a while, right?
Number of years. Yes.
And currently, how do you pay for the LPG received? Do you use what you receive from the supplier, or you have some other mechanism in which you verify that what you have now is in fact what you should be receiving?
Okay, so based on contract member and what established elsewhere, industry norm, it's the volume that is taken off the ship. So there's a surveyor who measures the quantity on the ship when it arrives. The volume that's taken off into your tanks, he measures the difference, what's left on the ship, and that's the difference that you'll pay for, right?
Which meter is not there? Which meter is not working?
What is not working?
Which meter you say is not? Did you not
say?
So
the LPG receival meter. So we are receiving based on the ship volumes, which is by contract and by measurement standards in terms
measurement at the ship as it's leaving the ship.
Correct.
But you're not measuring as it comes into your tank on land side.
We're not.
But you have a meter that's supposed to do that, but it's just not working.
How do we verify the volume? So the dependent is on the surveyor's numbers, Chairman.
Your contract says you have to pay for that anyway, because it's the contract is what left the ship is what you have to pay for.
Correct, and that's what the contract.
But you don't know whether
obtains.
what you're actually receiving in your tank is the same as what was measured as leaving the ship. You don't know that because
Yeah,
you don't have a
that is-
meter to
So
measure.
we have to be dependent on the contract,
But
and that is
that
pretty
is
much standard
unacceptable,
in
though.
the industry.
How do you?
No, the surveyors. So it is a.
But they can tell you anything.
What's that?
Can they just make up something and tell you? I mean,
No,
how do you verify?
These are international reputable companies. They value their reputation, and it is the same methodology that is used throughout the world, Chairman.
Why is your
members.
meter not working? And now, I mean, how long has it been out?
So again, remember there's another point about a LPG prover. So that meter has been out for more than 10 years now.
That was a prover
Correct.
issue. My goodness. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, Mr. Chairman, listening to the international news on so many occasions you hear of international fraud taking place. The company that we're buying crude oil or refined oil from is into business of making profit. How are we sure, what balance I'm asking Mr. Morgan, if the meters at that pumping or receiving station is out? You're saying to us that we must rely on the man who is selling to us?
No, it's not the man who sells.
No.
So you're saying that we rely on the independent person?
So we rely on the independent inspection company. for
Mr.
their
Chairman,
numbers.
Mr. Chairman, I think there's something, and I'm not saying that it's nefarious, but we are lapsing severely where that is concerned. It's too easy. It is too easy, Mr. Chairman.
We
It is too
we
easy.
paid over 400,000 US for a prover system which was never implemented and it now has major components that are obsolete and we don't even know if we can bother replace them.
Chairman,
Yeah.
if I may say, and may I bring your focus around the LPG numbers in particular. If you look at page 2, let me look if we have LPG here.
What's preventing us from getting a meter? You said it's been out for over 10 years.
Yes,
But
yes.
what is preventing us
From moving in that
from
direction.
moving in that direction?
So in answering that question, what I want to highlight, member, chairman, if you look at table 2, which basically speaks to the breakout of the various products, propane and butane, you're actually picking up gains in those areas rather than losses. Yeah? So no, I'm not saying it is okay. I'm not saying, I'm just making a point. Chairman, where that is concerned.
And when you say that, how do you get a gain? If you're measuring what came off the ship,
yes,
and that's what you're paying for, where do you get that gain? Where do you identify this gain as having occurred?
So at the end of the day, Chairman, based on what we have sold to what we have received and produced, we're ending up with a gain, which indicatively could say marginally are getting more LPG than even what we even paid for. At least indicatively it could say that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
that didn't make any sense to me. That clarification. I mean, if you can possibly go over that again
so I'm just
for me
putting it
to
to
understand.
the point. I just putting it to the point, member.
And are the
Chairman.
propane and butane are the totality of LPG product that you buy?
Correct.
Both of them are there.
Correct.
That's
So-
it for LPGs, those two elements.
Correct. So what I'm identifying there, we're ending up with a gain. Now, are we comforted by that? No, we're not comforted by that. Is the practice of receiving LPG by way of independent inspector an acceptable practice? It is. We do some checks on our receival tanks, but the number that is utilized is that which is the ship number that is released from the ship. And that's what the independent inspector gives. And that's a practice for other entities in
But
Jamaica.
all I would say,
and
Mr. Morgan, to that is, presumably there's a purpose why you were buying approval, and there's a purpose why there is a meter, right?
Correct.
And you've been without it
Correct.
for many, many years. So presumably there's something deficient in your surveillance.
So Chairman, we are not dismissing the fact that a meter is required. And it was for that very reason, about 10 years ago, we looked at the project and a meter was bought. Yeah? But again, as Mr. Watson had highlighted at the time, there were other competing priorities through resources, etc., which had us deferring that particular project until when we were ready to have it installed, we
For 10
realized
years?
that there was an issue.
For 10 years, sir?
So we got the
Is that the one
meter
that
it arrived, it was ordered in 2019 and arrived in 2010.
You said
So
from 2009 it went out.
Correct. So 2009 we ordered a new meter. Right?
That's not the one that went obsolete. That's something different.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that the one that went
That's
obsolete with the
That's
parts?
That's the one.
Okay, and so that was 400 and something thousand US, correct?
Correct.
Are we moving? Okay, from the next question then, are we then moving? Because I remember that from the last couple of meetings. Are we then moving towards getting a new meter?
Correct. So what we're doing right now, we're reevaluating, we're seeing what we can salvage from the prover meter system. And yes, we're looking to ensure that we validate our receiver numbers by virtue of a meter. But again, I'm going to highlight, Chairman, the main point of measurement is at the ship. The meter will be secondary. So I just want to underscore that. And the meter is really for validation.
Members, I'm going to entertain one last question on this topic and we move on. And it's Member Dunn who had his hand up first.
Chairman, how can we verify that the surveyor's information is correct? Can we see documentation relating to at least 2 or 3 shipments that looks at what was the cost at the point that the ship left the supplier to what we receive in Jamaica?
Yeah.
A follow-up to it, Mr. Chairman. The independent person, the independent person is in the mix to say, okay, it's 3 of us.
Seller. Person? Who pays the independent person? The ship, the seller, or the buyer, or you split it?
So it's a shared cost.
But again, Mr. Chairman, I was
between the buyer and the seller.
But just to
before you, Mr. Watson, because then you might just use one answer to capture both questions. My argument, sir, is that both parties brought in the independent person to verify each side to say, okay, you are wrong and this one is correct, or this one is correct and that one is wrong, because it is going to be 3 measurements. For 10 years now, Mr. Chairman, we're only getting 2, the seller and the independent person. Where are we in the mix?
Based on the contract that they have, I don't think that what our metering would tell us would just be for our own surveillance purposes, but what they actually are liable to pay is what they took off the ship. And the independent person does he verify that, or does he measure it himself? Is he the only source of the measurement?
He measures.
Yeah.
No.
There could be in transit losses which we just don't know. But Mr. Morgan is saying we make a gain on the LPG. So yeah.
But I just want to clarify
Mr. Watson
a point
wanted
that
to
sometimes this ship may not necessarily discharge everything they load with. So you're saying you want to see what is loaded, what is discharged. The ship may not necessarily be only coming to Jamaica. So you may see one set come on, a set is discharged in Jamaica, another parcel may go to another country. But the independent inspector is not, no. The independent inspector is there not for the seller or even for the buyer. this is an accepted norm in the industry that you have these independent surveyors, and that is all they do. No, but even with the meter is to satisfy ourselves. But I agree, but the point is, as Mr. Morgan said, that is being addressed. So we have to put in a meter, and that's being done.
All right, members, we're going to move on. The next item is Appendix 2, which is to do with the 35th anniversary and a representation of the costs around this item and how they're broken out. I don't have any questions on this myself. Again, the cost per head of persons attending is ultimately not provided because there's a comment. They've split out catering per head and invitations per head and long service awards per head, but not the overall cost because
Mr. Chairman, you have the overall cost, under the total expenditure, actual, that is the overall cost. What we were saying is that there are some costs that is not assigned to a person.
Yeah.
So, for instance, the venue or entertainment.
Yeah. But
it's a general figure.
What we asked for is how much did this banquet cost per head? So you're telling us what the catering costs per head and the invitations cost per head, but you didn't allocate the total cost per head because you say some cost items don't really are not affected by how many people turn up. But at the end of the day, when you're assessing what this thing...
it's just a matter of dividing 400 by 15 million.
Which is what we did last time.
No, but that was done, and I think by Member Bunting, that's what he had said.
He was.
So what we had said is we would on the cost so you could see exactly.
Divide 15 million, 0.5 million by 400 persons. You say, wow, this banquet cost nearly $50,000 a person. Yeah.
That was done, and what
it was done by Member Bunting. You still haven't done it.
But it's all here, and this is a more.
And you haven't done it because
figure.
you don't think it's really a relevant number. But for us, it was a relevant number. Anyway, we can move on from this. Thank you for this presentation, though, and for the additional breakdown that you provided. The last item in the letter was to do with the pricing, the terms of reference in the pricing committee, and maybe this is a useful segue because I think when we were looking at the prompt, we had reached item 8. And item 8, I think, is to do with pricing as well. And in fact, you had very kindly provided us with the opportunity to attend the pricing committee meeting last week. I was unable to attend. I was suffering from a throat problem that week. But I think one of us went, at least. Member Bunting, you attended, and maybe you could give us an indication of what of that experience.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me just start by acknowledging that Mr. Watson and his team on the pricing committee were very helpful and very professional in accommodating me and giving me the explanations. The issue, however, is that it still did not resolve my concerns about the objectivity of the formula. And I just give you 3 or 4 examples of elements in the formula that caused this concern. The first is that we had always heard, and I think even in the cover sheet for one of the explanations given, in fact, for this section in that, I think it's called attachment 2, the big black folder, in describing the pricing mechanism update, it starts by saying pricing formula stems from a 1988 ministerial directive. Petrojam's pricing committee reviews the change in the U.S. Gulf Coast reference price and the other pricing elements in order to determine the ex-refinery price. And it goes on. Now, in fact, what the price that goes into the formula is the actual price that Petrojam pays for the particular product at the particular time that it is purchasing. What it does is express that actual price as the Gulf reference price plus the acquisition differential or premium. But so it's really not based on the Gulf reference price. It's based on the actual purchase price of the product on that particular contract. So the Gulf reference price is only used as a convenient way of expressing the price that they actually purchase it at. But the input in the formula is not the Gulf reference price. It is the actual price that they acquire the product at, plus or minus Gulf reference. So that's the first thing. So the idea that there is some remote independent reference price that is used and Petrojam's relative purchasing skill, as compared with that, that's not the case. It is what goes into the formula is what they actually purchase at. So that was the first point.
Chairman, Member Bunting, can you repeat what you just said? Because every week when you hear the price goes up, Petrojam says the Gulf reference price is such and our thing is set based on what the Gulf reference price is. Are you saying that this is a sham? Maybe not as indelicate as I have.
I would probably express it more diplomatically. What I would say is that the combination of two elements of the pricing formula, the U.S. Gulf reference price and the acquisition differential / premium, when those are combined, it gives you the actual price that the product is acquired at. And therefore, the Gulf reference price is part of the way they express the purchase contract. So, just for example, if the Gulf reference price is $1 per liter for the particular product, $1 US per liter, and they get it and they actually purchase it at $1.10, then they would say the input into the formula is $1.10 because it's $1 for the Gulf reference price plus 10 cents for the acquisition
But if I can
premium.
just add a point right there. So when you're buying from Trinidad, Venezuela, or the US, they're doing the same thing. What they're saying is the price to you is $1 based on the Gulf reference plus. So it's not unusual. So nobody's going to say the Gulf reference is $1, here's $1. What they do is they say the price is reference to the Gulf, and then it can be plus or minus. So when we report that the U.S. Gulf price is coming down or going up, that is actually what's happening. So we're, instead of buying at $1 plus 10 cents this week, next week it's 80 cents. You may still have the same 10 cents, But now the Gulf reference went down. So what we report is that the price is now 90 cents based on the Gulf reference going down. The following week it can go to 150.
But if your inventory was actually costing you $1.10 per liter, your inventory, and at the time you bought it, the Gulf reference price was $1, and the acquisition differential was 10 cents. And then you pay a premium.
That is how the market operates.
So if during the interval between when you bought that inventory and so on, and when you're doing the pricing, if the Gulf reference price has fallen, that's not going to affect your pricing.
Not immediately, because you will have a couple of days, but then you get the up and the down.
Right.
So it
So
balances back
eventually it will work its way through as you buy more product, assuming that you're buying, by reference to what the market is selling at a particular point in time.
It balances itself, you get the ups and the downs.
Yeah. So anyway, go on, Mr. Watson.
Right. So, as Mr. Watson has confirmed, the Gulf reference price is a
reference.
Industry reference.
Yes.
But what the input in the formula is the actual acquisition price, which I just want to make that clear. The second factor, which again I said is a concern to me, is this market adjustment factor. It's a discretion applied primarily to maintain prices to consumers within a band of plus or minus $3 from week to week for any given product. And it's to keep it within the band, but then how much to keep it within the band, again, is sort of, left to the people around the table. The price would be better at, whatever, how you express it. I'm just using an example, no particular relevance. Instead of $2.90, let's make it $2.95. There's still quite a discretion, even within the $3, keeping it within the $3 band. I would prefer if there was some more. I don't have a problem with the price smoothing to reduce the volatility, but rather than say it's left to the discretion of the committee, I would prefer to say, well, if it hits the upper limit, it just stops at the upper limit for that week. So if it's going to exceed $3, you just stop it at whatever amount that it was last week plus the $3. Or if it was going to decline by the $3, you just stop it at whatever the amount was last week by the $3, rather than within that band, sort of, should we make it $2.50? Should we make it, sort of that thing?
No, but it's not as wide as that, Mr. Bond.
I wanted to ask, is that possible, what he's saying, to actually do that?
You could lock it at exactly $3, yes.
Okay, so you can lock it in at a specific price.
Yeah. So I would just say, it would take, you'd know what it is, and so it would leave that sort of discretionary from week to week.
In other words, if the price moved by less than $3, up or down, whatever it was is what you charge. You wouldn't adjust it by reference to some other.
No. It's the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
If the price moves within that $3 band, up or down, then it is moved. Right?
To what it actually is.
To what it actually is.
Saying.
And it's not
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
So there's no discretion within that $3 movement. Within that $3 band, you don't have an adjustment by the committee.
No, and that's
it's
how
only
it is
if
now.
it passes the outer band, you cap it at
it's
the
only when it goes
that's
beyond
correct.
the band that
That's
the
correct.
discretion applies.
No, he's not, Mr.
No, you're correct.
Yeah.
So within the $3, plus or minus, anything happening there, it is what
it's just whatever the formula spits out.
But is that what they do, or is that
Yes. That
So
as far as I could see, that is what it was.
Well, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you said that they were applying a discretion within the
No,
band.
when it goes outside the band. So let us say it went to $3.50. Now, they might bring it back, instead of exactly to $3, they might bring it back to $2.90, is what I'm saying. So,
99.
or $2.99. As the case was, as may have been a particular case, because it was felt that $3 would look like it was a rigged price, when, if it was a nice round number, so they take off an extra cent or something like that. I don't want to get down in the weeds, but I'm just saying, if you just use whatever the cutoff was, it will be more objective and perhaps have more confidence.
But remember that there is a 2% plus or minus around the $3, which I think you saw that. So that is what we apply.
Right.
Around the $3. So it's
so
not totally
that's there. And as I
discretionary.
said, I don't have a problem with a price smoothing mechanism, but I would prefer if it's just automatically applied rather than a discretionary.
say there's around when you apply the ban, there's a further discretion of 2% either side of the $3.
When you get to that $3,
you can move it 2%
but
up or down.
It's 2%. It's a
so why do you have
number.
that? Why do you bother with that?
So why what?
Why do you have this 2% for around the $3?
Well, the truth is, it's primarily what he said. So
Yeah.
the number, if you had everything at $3, it looks.
I see. So it's the optics. It's optics. All right.
Right.
So
It's a further
2%.
optical adjustment. So
But
in order to make
listen,
it
remember,
not look
it only work out to like 1 cent or 2 cents. It's not a
right.
big number.
So I'm not saying.
But
I'm
it's
not,
every week, you know, and it adds up.
no. But it also goes the other way.
All right. So, but moving on from that, there is another factor called the foreign exchange recovery factor. And that is something that's put in there to attempt to cover the foreign exchange losses on the inventory that might be incurred if the dollar moves adversely against the company. And that, in a sense, is normally a commercial risk that operations take. I mean, if a private company had imported that fuel to sell, those movements in the dollar would be a risk, a business risk that they would take and that they would have to control. In this case, that is essentially covered or hedged by a factor in the pricing formula, which really covers commercial risk of Petrojam. So that, I question whether that is legitimate in a commercial operation. There are other...
But just with that, is it not that they're essentially just passing on their loss to the consumer?
They're passing on their loss to the consumer.
Which any commercial enterprise would want to do if they could, but with a
may not be able
market,
to.
they may not be able
may
to.
not be able to in a competitive market.
Right.
So if you, and Petrojam certainly to an extent, although they are the dominant player, you know, there are other competitors who import products who don't have this kind of protection, who are competing against Petrojam.
No. What they don't have is somebody looking at it the way you are saying and disclosing it in public. You think they're going to buy? You think they're going to buy? You think they're going to buy and lose on their imports?
Look,
why would they do that?
No, Mr. Watson, in business, not every purchase that a trader makes, they make money on.
That's the point.
On average, they will make money, but there will be some that they will lose on.
No, you're exactly correct. And we balance, and we also recover it.
Mr. Watson, I'm
anyway,
just giving my view.
It to you. Yeah.
Since I spent 3 or 4
Chairman,
hours of my time
I think
coming
we already
down
went
to
through all of
Petrojam
this.
to attend.
I really don't think it's
and I
all
didn't do
that
it as an
necessary.
individual. I came there as a member of the committee.
It's relevant to hear what the elements of the pricing formula are that are discretionary.
And this is relevant to a finding of the Auditor General. There are also other factors that, you know, I would question whether would be appropriate. There's something called an unplanned supply factor, which is a premium added to cover loyalty costs. If Mr. Watson wants to expand on that.
No.
There are things like a small refinery differential. There is a ultra low sulfur diesel capital recovery charge. Now, you know, it's very unusual in commercial operations to have these input into your weekly prices. And this is, Petrojam is a dominant player in the market, so it essentially sets the prices, and to the extent that the prices are padded, it will cause consumers generally to pay more than they need to pay. Now, yes, that factors are put in.
Mr. Bunting, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I think the reason why the panel shared this with you, not in this room, is because they don't want to disclose that. I think they do not wish to disclose some of the things that you're asking.
With respect, if you
had read, explained to you,
had you read the package attachment 2, everything that I'm reading
I don't think they need to disclose.
From what is in that package.
I think we're fully aware
everything
and we understand, and I don't think it's necessary for them to really disclose that. Am I? Go ahead.
The information as to the inputs in the pricing formula is what we're discussing.
Right.
Is what we're discussing.
I'm not giving the actual formula.
So,
I'm
for
putting
example,
the inputs.
the price
and this is outlined in the bundle that was given to us. So I'm not disclosing any secret. This is the bundle that is given to us that's tabled and that's public.
So the LPG capital recovery cost. How long is that? How long has that been
ultra
going
low
on?
sulfur diesel,
Yes.
ULSD, capital recovery. That is until payback in 2020, Mr. Watson. When did that start?
I believe last year, no? About last year, I think.
Right. So, as you can see, Mr. Chairman, there are a number of factors that I think could be argued don't belong in the pricing formula. What I would suggest to this committee is that some independent, whether you need a technical team with economists, with petroleum industry specialists, to review this, to my mind, and to make a recommendation. But as I started out by saying, I'm not being critical of the Petrojam team. This is something that has been going on for decades. But I'm saying for a price that's so important to our economy, fuel prices, I think we should really look at having a mechanism that's independently developed, a pricing formula mechanism that's independently developed, and also one that's administered by somebody like the OUR. I don't know if the OUR, technically Petrojam might not be a utility, but they're almost a dominant player and almost a monopoly in the petroleum sector. So I think there should be an independent body that reviews this if we're going to have that central price setting.
Was there an element to do with recovery, apart from the low sulfur diesel? Was there a general capital charge in the pricing for cost of capital?
No, I didn't. Well, there was
finance charges.
There's a charge to recover refinancing of purchases, and it's called finance charges, and it represents the average interest cost of refinancing the purchases using a weighted average cost of their actual financing, their lines of credit. Because the terms that they get from the supplier typically don't cover the cycle. So they need to supplement that with financing from banks or other financial institutions.
So these elements, all of them date back to 1988? Or other than the one, like the low sulfur diesel obviously wouldn't, the recovery of that?
Most of them, I can't remember exactly, line by line.
Yeah.
But yes.
But essentially, they're all designed to ensure that Petrojam makes a positive return on its business operations.
No, they're actually, the pricing formula is designed for Petrojam to be the least cost supplier to the market. Petrojam is not a monopoly, you know. We might be dominant, but we're not a monopoly. You have other people that can import, and they do import. And if, as Member Bunting said, we were padding our prices, they would not buy from Petrojam, they would just import it. So that cannot be accurate. If our price is not competitive, they would not buy from us.
So what element in your pricing formula responds to competitive pressures? If you're recovering your capital outlay for low sulfur diesel, and you're recovering your actual finance charges based on how you finance your inventory, and you're actually charging what your suppliers charge you through the acquisition differential, what part of your pricing is driven by competitive pressures?
Every part of that price gives you, at the end of the day, it gives you a competitive price. If not, they would not buy. The people who can import, have the ability to do import and do import, would not buy from you. They would import it. It is very simple. The pricing formula is the least cost to supply to Jamaica.
Mr. Watson, I don't necessarily agree with you, because for any competitor to import in volumes to compete with you would require a massive investment in infrastructure, the terminal and tank farm.
But they have it in Montego Bay.
No, they have little tiny ones relative to you. Tiny ones relative to you. They can't compete with you in terms of the overall volumes. So the truth of the matter is that it would take, I think from one of the Muse standstill reports I saw, something like 300 million or 350 million US dollars to replace or to build the equivalent of what you have at Petrojam now. Not the refinery, just the tank farm and the loading racks and the terminal and the wharf and all of those things. So that is the barrier to entry that competitors have, why they continue to buy from you. And also because the industry itself is not a highly competitive industry. One of the things that was pointed out is that the margins that the companies make fluctuate widely. Well, the companies and the marketing companies and the dealers, if you look at given that they all buy at the same price from Petrojam, the price to the consumer fluctuates very widely, which suggests that the market is not a very competitive market. But that's another issue. We're just dealing today on the Petrojam side of it. But I would give Petrojam the fact that there's a much greater variation in the pricing after it leaves the refinery loading rack, which doesn't seem to have any justification in terms of the actual cost of transportation or something like that. So you don't have an efficient industry from a pricing point of view, because you have very wide fluctuations in end product prices across the country.
I mean, some sittings ago I made the point that I think it's important for an independent technical analysis of the pricing formula itself, getting into the nitty-gritty of how it's compiled and to see to what extent it protects the consumer fairly and the refinery, that the balance is properly weighted in the public interest. I don't think we can just rely on Petrojam to tell us that, because there has been skepticism and there will continue to be skepticism around that until it is independently. Now, you said that the IMF is looking at this. I believe you said the IMF is doing some work on this. Is that correct, P.S.?
Yeah, I was waiting. No.
What Mr. Watson had?
I was waiting on an opportunity to speak, sir. Chairman, members, I did say that we invited the IMF to give us some assistance. The IMF did some work already, which is in the papers, but it didn't even refer to Jamaica. It was just general.
It was an analysis, I think, on the benefits or otherwise of having these price smoothing.
And that was the only element. The price smoothing is just one tiny element of this pricing formula.
Yeah, but I am advising the committee again. We did engage the IMF to assist us, and without more, the Petrojam Strategic Review Committee has submitted its report, and that is under consideration of Cabinet. And I would think in the next few weeks or so, the revelations of that will be for consideration.
Thank you.
If you could just expand, I seem to recall that the pricing mechanism was within the terms of reference of that, the ZACA committee. I can't remember the technical name of the committee, but the ZACA chaired committee. And you're saying that in their report, they have done an assessment of the pricing mechanism and that will be made public?
I didn't say that, sir. I said they have done a thorough review of Petrojam's operations at a strategic level, and there is a lot of analysis and examination that has been done, and I am venturing because it's being studied by Cabinet now, so I'm not at liberty to speak. Suffice it to say, the information will be available to us shortly.
Member Dunn has been waiting a long time.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. What I think the Jamaica public wants to know is this, and Member Bunting went to the pricing meeting. From your observation, was there any excess or abuse seen in terms of how the pricing was determined? That's one. And two, what was your overall impression of the pricing mechanism as determined by that committee?
As I said when I started out, my impression of the membership of the committee is that they were professional. They certainly were courteous and accommodating to me and my questions. And no, I didn't get lunch, but I got coffee. But they are essentially applying, you know, a formula and a set of spreadsheets that is coming forward from a long time ago. I mean, it has been developed. You know, there have been factors that have been added, you know, more recently, like the ultra-low sulfur diesel capital recovery charge. But this is essentially, they're managing a formula that most persons there, probably with the exception of the technical manager who has been there 35 years, I saw his picture on the wall. But apart from him, everybody else probably came and inherited the formula. So I'm not casting any aspersions at all on the persons who currently manage it. All I'm saying is that the formula itself, I think, should be reviewed and administered by an independent body. Can't be that the same persons who are doing the commercial operations are the ones that we expect to be objective about the price setting. That is just not in human nature. So this is why I think as part of the committee's report, Mr. Chairman, we should make a recommendation in that regard. I think that's quite within our remit. And I am proposing that we make some recommendation to have that independent review. The PS had said that there's some initiatives underway in that regard already. And not just to review it, not just to review as a sort of one-off, but to be involved in the ongoing application and administration of the pricing formula.
Which there's precedent, isn't there? That we saw with
what the company might think is reasonable, you know, in balancing the interests of consumers versus the company. The OUR may not think so. And all I'm saying is that I believe we would benefit from having that independent review system mechanism in this case. And I should mention that there was someone from the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Energy. There were a couple persons who were not Petrojam employees. But in the scheme of things, again, they were just reviewing the application of the formula. They were not reviewing the formula itself.
Chairman.
Yes.
The members from the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology were visitors like Member Bunting to observe the process to make sure that we were aware of what was going on.
All right.
The Ministry of Finance, as I told the committee some weeks ago, is now a representative on the committee.
Pricing committee.
Yes. So the Ministry of Finance rep is properly represented there now. And I would like to remind this committee that I did say we had reached out to the IMF. Whatever recommendations we are going to get, there is going to be the establishment of a policy to govern pricing going forward. So yes, we have a proposal in the documentation that has been presented that Petrojam has worked out for itself, but the ministry is taking it to a different level where we are doing independent, relevant expertise examination of the pricing, and we will be taking on board whatever recommendations come out of the Petrojam strategic review.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Member Campbell, you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. And perhaps Mr. Watson is better able to deal with this. At the time when the present formula was arrived at, was Member Paulwell part of the team that examined the putting together of that formula?
No, that was before his time. You're going back to 1988, and I don't think...
1988, after we acquired the refinery. Remember what happened, we acquired the refinery, from, I think it was Esso, all right? And presumably they had approached the pricing, and I don't know, but the then minister, wrote a detailed letter.
Hugh Hart at the time.
Yes, Mr. Hart, and that is still the kind of governing document nearly 40 years later.
But I should point out that the IMF, it wasn't the IMF. Yes.
Well, that's the point.
I think the IMF and some other
and some international consultants
helped to put
the formula together.
Sorry, to put together that document.
Yes, and
so it wasn't that document that was conceived by Petrojam. I mean, you had Petrojam personally.
And could you tell us?
You mean back in 1988?
But you had the World Bank as part of the team that put together.
Yes, and when could you tell us when that was done?
When?
Yeah, which year?
It was done, well, the formula was implemented in 88. So I presume
but the review which was done by the World Bank and the other organizations, could you tell us when that was done?
No,
that was not done in 88.
No.
No, Mr. Watson, my understanding is he's saying that 1988 document, which detailed the pricing approach, had the input of the World Bank in it.
Came out of the World Bank.
Yeah.
You've not had any subsequent reviews?
Not by the World Bank, no, or the IMF.
And so you haven't had anybody done any numerical analysis of that formula to determine whether or not the conditions which nothing has been done?
No, not really. I mean, we have done inputs and updates, but not a review the way you're describing it.
And you're saying the last time that was done? So when Member Paul came to us and said that it was the best option, what was he speaking to?
To the pricing formula we're currently
that is the best one that could be arrived at in the circumstances.
That's correct.
Thank you.
He said that when? Sorry?
There's a newspaper article, I can find it and send it to you. I can't remember the exact date, but I have it.
My own view, given how from time to time this issue comes up in the public domain with the marketing companies and the service station operators and so on, having an independent technical review of it. It's 1988 is a long time ago. The market was very different then. The oil market was different, and the local petroleum industry market was different. It's evolved a lot. I think that we should have an independent review of the pricing mechanism to see whether the weightings are appropriate, whether all the inputs are still relevant or appropriate or not. They may bless it and say it's wonderful, or they may say, well, it was appropriate then, but we don't think now these particular elements should still be part of it. And because at the end of the day, you want to ensure that the formula doesn't allow Petrojam to operate in an inefficient way, that it incentivizes the efficiency of your operations. In the same way that, as I understand it, the pricing approach for JPS, for example, with electricity, doesn't allow them just to recover all of their losses from the consumer. Some of the non-technical losses they have to eat because they have to absorb it themselves out of their shareholders' money. So that is a sort of thing that I think needs to be looked at. Yeah, we've heard another view of that as well. All right, I think we can move on. But the actual prompt issue, the issue in the prompt for issue 8 was to do with the absence of minutes. And of the pricing committee's determinations, their weekly meetings. And we know that a term of reference has been developed and is being aspects of it will be looked at again, arising from the comments. And the minutes are now being kept. That's right. Right. So we can move on to issue 9. It's 20 to 1, so we'll probably take this as the last issue for the day. Issue 9, Petrojam relied on imported finished products as refinery production fell below customers' demand. Although Petrojam reported that the throughput or yield from imported crude oil averaged 94% over the last 5 years, 2013-14 to 2017-18, refinery production averaged 7.4 million barrels each year, representing 56% of the annual total production capacity, which is 13.1 million barrels. So this could only satisfy 49% of its customers' demand, which is 15.2 million barrels. So the demand, according to this, is 15.2 million barrels per year, and you're actually producing, on average, 7.4, which is 49%. To ensure the availability of petroleum supplies, Petrojam relied on imported finished products to meet the shortfall, which averaged 7.8 million barrels per year. And there's a management response to improve the 73% capacity utilization. No, you say 73% here, but in the text above, it's actually saying, I think, 56%. Anyway, to improve the capacity utilization close to 100%, Petrojam has instituted a bad actors list, equipment and processes which impact plant reliability, and has been implementing projects and initiatives to reduce that list, thus improving plant reliability. In the last major maintenance activity turnaround in May to August last year, 2018, several pieces of equipment which affected plant reliability were replaced or repaired and rehabilitated. For example, 3 hydrofiners and 1 distillation tower were replaced. 1 major furnace was rehabilitated and several pipelines were repaired. Included in the corporate plans and budgets for the last 5 years, including financial year 2018-19 and 2019-20, are projects and initiatives to improve reliability. So, Mr. Watson, sorry, you say here that the plant has been operating at 73% capacity.
Yes, maybe I can explain what.
Yeah.
So the market in Jamaica is approximately 50,000 barrels, between 48 and 50,000 barrels per day. That's the total market. Sorry?
Per what?
Barrels per day.
Per day.
Per day. So the refinery initially was designed at 36,000 barrels per day, but it was designed to run with a particular type of crude, which is like your gravity and your sulfur and all that. That crude in particular came from Venezuela. So over the years, we have not been able to get that crude. So the refinery was derated to about 32,000 barrels thereabout, with not 36, based on the input crude you can get. Then when you add things like, you have to do an annual shutdown for catalyst regeneration. So the catalyst is the part of the unit that makes the gasoline. You have to shut that down. So we plan in our schedule to shut down maybe 20, 30 days out of each year for major maintenance regeneration. When you look at that maths, it rates the refinery down to about 10.7 million per year barrels production capacity. So that works out to about 27 and a half per day. You're following me? We are running at about 25,000 barrels per day. So the point I'm making, and that is where the 73% comes from. So if you take that. But in general, the refinery will have to import finished products to make up that deficit. We cannot make all the product that Jamaica requires. We have to import.
I think so. The 56% was based on the actual plant capacity, assuming you could get the crude that is designed to get.
Absolutely.
But your number is saying, well, we can't get that, so we need to reduce the 36 to a more realistic number.
That's correct.
And then there's another adjustment for something else that you just
like
shutdown time.
That's
and then
correct.
you're saying you're actually doing quite well because you're at 25 out of 27,000.
I mean,
per day.
ideally, we try to get up to 28, 30 even sometimes. But then you get into other technical issues. You get into whether you're producing too much HFO, whether the reformer is the gasoline section can manage it. So
there are two factors at work as I understand it. There is one just in terms of output, just how much you can push through the plant.
Right.
But there's a second factor, which is if that output corresponds to the demand. So it may not be in proportion to what the market requires. So you might end up with more heavy product than the market demands in order to maximize the amount of light product.
Absolutely, and that happens with HFO, especially because that refinery is designed to produce almost 50% HFO. So one of the things we have been pushing, and I'll just digress a little, is the refinery upgrade. Because to take that HFO that we produce 50% of and do something with it, which is the VDU.
The refinery was built after, in what, just remind me what year?
62.
62? So would it have had this high percentage of HFO because it knew, for example, that Jamaica Public
then?
That it knew that, for example, Jamaica Public Service would have been a customer that would be taking a lot of HFO.
In the 60s, the multinationals were building small refineries to supply HFO primarily. So they had a small one in Barbados. It was like 5,000 barrels a day, if so much. You had Aruba, you had Trinidad, 2 or 3 refineries, you had Jamaica. But these refineries were built primarily to supply the HFO market. So if you go somewhere like, thinking it could be Colombia or Costa Rica, one of them had same capacity like us, similar design. Over the years, these refineries, seeing the market change, have done upgrades to their units. We have not. And what has caught us now is JPSCO about to switch from HFO to LNG.
And do you typically make better margins on the refined products or on the finished products?
You make better margins when you run the refinery because what you're doing, you're taking a 350,000 barrel ship with all your crude, and you're extracting your gasoline, your diesel, your jet fuel out of that. Now, but you're also producing HFO, which typically sells cheaper than the crude. So crude might be selling for $70 a barrel. When you sell HFO, it's probably like $65, depending on the market.
So how do you not make a loss?
Because
the clean products sell for much more.
Other clean products are much
on the
higher.
HFO, you make a loss on the HFO. Yeah.
I mean, there are times when the market will reverse, supply and demand. But the other clean products, and especially asphalt, those are fairly high value products that we make good margins on. But when you look at the refinery margin of running the refinery versus terminaling, which is us buying and selling, the refinery margin tends to be better when you run the refinery.
And what's the sort of shelf life or useful life of your plant? How long, when it was built, how long was it designed or intended to last?
All right, if you have to look at.
I mean, we hear, for example,
the technology.
We hear, for example, that Old Harbour Power Station.
No, it doesn't work like that. Right?
Okay, tell me how it works.
The technology is old. The technology is old technology, but the plant, over the years, we have changed drums, we have basically changed towers,
rebuilt the plant.
We have retooled, but the technology remains the same. So it doesn't have a life in that sense. Where the life will get affected then is when you cannot meet the market demand for the products that they require. So if we continue to make HFO and we cannot do anything with the HFO, and we can't export it for bunkers or what have you, or we don't have another JPSCO, then you're going to get to the stage where you're making all this HFO, but you don't have a market. So you're going to end up with a bottleneck where you have to shut down the refinery. That could happen.
When is that going to happen? When do you anticipate that will happen?
Let me answer by telling you that.
Did you just say that, Mr. Chairman?
I am not expecting that to happen because we're doing a number of creative things in the refinery to ensure we meet the market demand. One of them is, can we expand our asphalt production? Yeah. Now, we're one of the few asphalt refineries in the region. So we export asphalt even to Trinidad. So we're building on that market. What we need to sell more asphalt would have been like the VDU, the vacuum distillation unit, which is, it takes the HFO and run that through a vacuum unit, to an asphalt plant, and we make more asphalt. So whereas before we were selling that HFO to JPSCO or to the bunker market, we would take that HFO, run it through an asphalt plant, we make more asphalt, and we can export that. We have done the studies, we know there's a market for asphalt. The other thing we're looking at is, can we bring in lower sulfur crude oil that will allow us to make lower sulfur HFO, which we can sell into the bunker market. Sorry?
You say that as it stands now, HFO is roughly 50% of what you make.
Approximately, that's correct.
And that's not viable as is in the long
run. No, it's not going to be
JPS takes off what percentage of that?
Most of it, almost 40. I mean, almost 70%, maybe 75%.
So 40 of the 50.
About 40 of the 50.
And there, I mean, this is not. I mean, we're pretending as if these things are secret. I mean, it's publicly known.
No, but we have said it, you know.
I think it it's January next year. It was originally scheduled for. I don't know if it's on track.
Yes.
That the JPS was going to commission their new gas-fired.
No. What happened is in January next year, the bunker market.
Or the bunker market.
Changed the fuel spec. In this year, August, by
sometime
July,
later
August,
this year,
JPSCO is going to switch to LNG.
So you really just have a few months to play with in terms of getting some creative and getting alternative markets or getting a new supply of low sulfur crude.
So we are currently exploring low supplies, our supplies for low sulfur crude. That's something we're doing as we speak. We're expecting our first shipment by July. So we can, because you have to also test if the refinery can run that low sulfur crude and give you the type of output you require.
That's to produce bunker
it will
fuel?
Produce bunker fuel, yes.
Oh.
And of course, as I said, we continue to produce asphalt with that. We're also putting in an additional line that will allow us to export more asphalt volumes. So our asphalt plant can make about 1,200 barrels a day of asphalt. The Jamaican market under normal conditions about 600 barrels. So that additional production capacity, we're exporting that as well.
Is that only to in and around the Caribbean, or you've already identified?
Well, we have like around the Caribbean, we have Puerto Rico, we have the U.S. market in some instances.
Oh.
They have asked us.
Do you have competition in this, Mr. Watson?
Asphalt?
Yes.
Not, I think I know where you're going.
Huh?
Not in this region, no.
So you don't have anybody in this country who is selling asphalt to
in
to
Jamaica?
the plants? Yes, I'm asking. Okay.
Everybody buy from Petroleum.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Warrington.
No, we should be mindful of the time that we get out here by 1. And I have an issue to address.
To address an issue, Mr. Warrington?
Yes, I want to.
Well, before you get to it, any other questions on this topic? All right, go ahead, Mr. Mohammed.
What's a minute lost again? Earlier on, the issue was raised, and I said that I couldn't respond to what was said because I wasn't familiar of the issue that was raised then. Mm-hmm. And you asked me for a response or withdraw. I said I couldn't at that time. Since then, the article was sent to me, and it says the government to table first. Let me read what was sent to me here. Government to table first audit report on Auditor General in years. It said there's at least one position on which the Auditor General and Deputy Leader of the House agree that Jamaica can be a better country through effective audit scrutiny. This is the vision statement of the Auditor General's Department, and is always printed in bold across the cover of each report of the department's usual severe audit of government ministries, department and agencies tabled in Parliament. However, for years, Everett Warmington, Deputy Leader of the House, has entirely accused Parliament of refusing to require an audit of the department and table it in the chamber. Yesterday, Parliament confirmed that Finance Minister and the Public Service, Dr. Nigel Clark, will today be tabling the first audit report in the Auditor General Department in approximately 10 years, which is more than that anyhow. On several occasions, Warmington had raised the issue that an audit should be done of all government finance agencies, including the Auditor General Department. No government agency should be allowed to benefit from the public purse without providing its audited financials. He has been warning the House for the last few years. In 2007, he argued that if the Ministry of Finance was unwilling to do the task, it should be outsourced. Even assurance from the Minister of Finance and Public Service, Shaw, that it would be done that year by his ministry was not enough to convince Warmington. He said that he had been making the request for more than 4 years, not 4 years, making requests under 4 ministers of finance without results. Every other department and agency is audited by this department, and this department is always critical of other ministries and agencies. And nobody is looking into the operations of this department. It's a damn shame, he told the House in March this year. Dr. Clark immediately assured him again that he will see that the department is audited and report tabled in this House. But even with today's tabling of the report, Warmington said he would not be satisfied until all the missed reports, which he said could stretch back for as many as 10 years, are tabled. What are they going to do? It can't start at the middle or at the end, so they may have to go back 10 years. I have reason why I want them to be tabled. There are questions that need to be answered, and these reports are not going to be laid and nothing more heard about them, he told the Jamaica Observer yesterday, suggesting that the report should be sent to a House committee for a full review. This article, however, seemed to cause persons to be having stroke or burst in some blood vessel. I don't need anyone to recommend to me what issue I need to take to Parliament or raise in Parliament. I have served in this House for 20 years, never needed this advice before, and now that retirement beckons me. Why should I need this advice? I need to see where or what section of this article I need to withdraw or apologize to. There's nothing critical of the department. The department doesn't do the audit. So why people gonna get burst blood vessels and have strokes? I said nothing wrong here. I've been saying it for years. And to raise in Parliament, the article clearly states that I've raised this in Parliament every single year. And I can't see one section or single sentence that I need to amend. I read the total article that was sent to me.
It's the last sentence, I think.
What was the last sentence?
Yeah, where you said there are issues. The question is, when you say there are issues, what issues are yours? That suggests that there's something that you want to see reported on in this. Like there's some issues that should be uncovered. What issues?
What I'm saying, I need to see the report just as I'm seeing other reports. That's my contention.
Okay, so you need to see the report.
I need to see the reports, and as I said, I am not prepared to accept any 2 years.
Right.
It must go back for For all the years, I back here now. This is my 17th straight year out of my 20th year.
So the issue for you is the fact that you haven't seen the reports and you should have seen them.
They have never been laid.
All right, that's your issue.
This is my 17 years, 20 years.
That's the only issue that you're...
I'm concerned about right now. I've served 20 years, and for under Adrian Strawn, there's always report.
Very well, because
but things have changed. I don't know what has changed.
I think it was the wording of the report in the newspaper that gave rise to some concerns, and you have clarified that your concern remains simply that the report should have been presented and have not been. We can leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman, and I'm very happy for the clarification. I have no quarrel with anyone regarding the provision of reports to the House based on an audit of the Auditor General's Department. I'm in full support of that. However, I was concerned about the wording of the article and thought it fit to raise the issue because of the impact that it has on the department, which is really bigger than me, and I would think anyone else. As it pertains, I need to clarify, I need to make it very clear that the Ministry of Finance, the internal auditor, has conducted a report and review of the department for every year. Why the report is not tabled, I cannot provide an explanation for that. However, it would not be fair to say for 17 years a report was not tabled because it was under a revision of the FAA Act, I believe somewhat in 2010, thereabout, that made it a requirement for the audit report emanating from an audit of the Auditor General's Department to be tabled in the House. I cannot accept any responsibility for the contents or the form which that report takes when it comes to the House today. But I'm happy that the matter has been clarified.
Thank you, Auditor General, for bringing it to our attention that the requirement has only existed in law since 2010. I think that's a very pertinent piece of information. Would someone care to move for the adjournment?
I just have one concern, Chairman, before you move for the adjournment.
Yes, Dr. Guy.
Being a medic in the room, I want to know who have stroke and heart attack and blood vessels.
Moved and seconded.